Before we jump into today's episode, I want to let you know about a free workshop I'll be hosting on navigating the tween-teen expectation gap. If you're parenting a neurodivergent tween or teen and you have found yourself thinking, I wouldn't say that things were ever easy, but they definitely weren't always this hard, this workshop is for you. In this free workshop, I'll help you understand why this stage of parenting can feel so much heavier, what's happening beneath many of those behaviors you're seeing, and how a brain first understanding of your child's brain and nervous system can help you move forward with greater confidence, greater compassion, and maybe most importantly, greater hope. The workshop takes place on Thursday, August 6th, and if you can't join me live, no problem at all. Everyone who registers will receive the recording afterwards. You can learn more and reserve your spot at go.eileendevine.com/teens. Okay, now let's get into today's episode.
There are times when our kids say they want to do something, and we can see the clear path to them getting the thing or reaching that goal, and it seems so simple. Or maybe we recognize that it's not so simple, it's a bit more complex, but we're like, I will help you. You can definitely do this with support, and we'll make sure that happens. Let's do it. And so we walk them through the steps and we encourage them and we set up all the supports they need to be able to do the thing or reach the goal, and they just don't do it. It looks so oppositional. It makes no sense. Hi there, and welcome to the Brain First Parenting Podcast. I'm your host, Eileen Devine, and I am a therapist, parent coach, and educator who supports parents that are raising children, teens, and young adults with brain-based differences and challenging behavioral symptoms. If you are a parent or caregiver of a child who has intense, confusing, relentless, or sometimes even scary behaviors, you are in the right place, and I am so glad you're here. Let's get started. Hello and welcome back to the Brain First Parenting Podcast. I'm your host, Eileen Devine, and today I want to talk a little bit about motivation. It's a big deal for many of the parents I work with, especially those parents of teens and tweens, where self-motivation at that age, that adolescent age, it's an expectation that really enters into the picture. And, I get it. Remember, I have a teen myself, so I get why motivation, or what appears to be the lack thereof, it can be hard. A very hard thing to wrap our brains around as parents when it appears as though our child of any age has zero motivation. It could be motivation to get out of the house each day and just be in the world, or motivation to go to school consistently, motivation to attend to daily hygiene, motivation to take care of themselves and their health in other ways, motivation to go to the activity that they begged you to sign them up for, motivation to make friends, and then the ongoing motivation to invest in those friendships. I could go on and on. There's lots and lots of examples because life requires a certain amount of motivation to be successful in nearly every area of our life. So, it's completely understandable then that it's very triggering when we as parents see our child's behavior and our interpretation of that behavior is that they are just not motivated, like nothing motivates them. They are lazy, they do not care, they do not have any drive, they have zero drive, they have no ambition. And we worry about what this means for the rest of their life. Like, how will they ever progress? How will they ever reach goals? How will they ever, engage in the world in a way that gives them a meaningful life experience? How will they function in the world if they are not motivated? We also worry about how others will see us as their parents when this is happening. Things like, why don't you just make them do it? When we feel that, or maybe somebody has truly said those words to you, or we're given the messaging, or maybe we're told directly, like, this must be a result of you spoiling them. You've not held them to any standards. And so, of course, they're not motivated to do anything, right? Those sorts of really harsh judgments. It's like, if it only were that easy and simple to explain away. And then not to mention the self-judgment that can take up so much room in our own head. Like, what kind of parent am I if I have a child who is X number of years old and won't even do X, right? The seemingly simple thing that every other child at their age is doing without any effort, without any opposition at all. There's so much self-judgment with the parents I support. These parents who are absolutely amazing parents, but when they have no other explanation about why their child is behaving in this way that we're talking about today, they begin to wonder, is this about me? Is this why my child doesn't have any motivation to do anything? The other very triggering thing that happens around this issue of motivation, again, in relation to our child who struggles in this area and lives with a brain-based difference, there are times when our kids say they want to do something, and we can see the clear path to them getting the thing or reaching that goal, and it seems so simple. Or maybe we recognize that it's not so simple, it's a bit more complex, but we're like, I will help you. You can definitely do this with support, and we'll make sure that happens. Let's do it. And so we walk them through the steps, and we encourage them, and we set up all the supports they need to be able to do the thing or reach the goal, and they just don't do it. It looks so oppositional. It makes no sense because that they have this desire, at least that's what they've been saying, and their behavior is in complete contradiction to what they say they want. And it only adds to the frustration when you try to then engage them in a conversation about it, like, why isn't this happening? I thought you wanted this. And they respond with aggression or disrespect, or they just don't respond at all. They shut down. They refuse to talk to you about it. And you're left thinking, well, what is going on here? Like, this is a thing that you want, and I'm just trying to help you, and this is how you respond? Like, if you were just a bit more motivated, you wouldn't be in this position. We'd not be having this conversation at all. And that cycle just continues. Which brings me to another huge frustration, again, for parents of kids, tweens, teens, young adults with brain-based differences around this topic of motivation, which is that it seems as though nothing works to motivate them. I know that if this is a topic that resonates with you, this topic of motivation or lack of motivation with your child, then what is also true is that you have tried everything. And I mean everything to motivate your child. Bribes and consequences and threats and elaborate reward systems, trying to convince them in any way possible, any way imaginable, and it doesn't work. Or maybe in your not so proud parenting moments, we've all been there, you've unintentionally shamed them to try and motivate them. The parents that I've worked with have tried all of this and more, and it's really, really tough when none of it works. That can feel so frustrating, to put it lightly. It can feel devastating, really, like you're completely powerless as a parent. What I want to be able to do in today's episode is peel back the layers a bit so that you are super clear on what is actually required from a brain and nervous system perspective to be motivated, to be self-motivated, to maintain motivation, all of that, to hopefully give you some insight into why your child may struggle with this so much. And from there, how to support them differently in this area so that you aren't fighting against what is. What I mean by that is you're not fighting against your child's neurobiological makeup, how their brain and their nervous system works. Because when we can do that, stop that fighting against who our kids are, it helps ease that chronic frustration, that chronic feeling of frustration that you understandably feel. And then the burnout that it often, I say often, it's actually always, I think, leads to. It's not sustainable to be in that state of chronic frustration without it leading to burnout. What it also does when we can peel back these layers and see the brain and the nervous system function behind the behavior, it softens us. It helps us see, okay, I was trying my best to support my child with the information I had. Now I have more information. I can see this differently, and we approach them and our relationship with them in a different way. And so it strengthens that relationship, and it also reduces other negative outcomes that none of us want for our kids. Things like their lowered self-esteem, their increased feelings of shame. So let's begin there. Let's begin where we often do in these episodes, which is what cognitive skills are required to be motivated. Motivation is a brain thing. I'm saying that to parents all the time. Motivation is a brain thing. It requires cognitive skills that your child may or may not have fully developed. There's actually quite a few cognitive skills involved in being motivated. It seems really clear-cut and simple on the surface. That's our interpretation through a behavioral lens, but it is not. And so then when we can see all of the cognitive skills involved, we're like, oh, no wonder it's such a common struggle for so many of our kids who live with brains that work differently. Okay, so the first one that comes to mind when we're talking about cognitive skills required to be motivated is we need to have regulation and stress recovery skills in place. This is how well one can stay in balance emotionally and energetically, and how quickly and independently they can recover from stress that gets them out of balance. I refer to these skills as gateway skills, and the reason for that is these skills need to be strong and robust in order for the brain to access other cognitive skills. When they're not as strong, when they're lagging way behind, when our kids really, really struggle with these skills, they experience dysregulation more frequently, more intensely, which means their thinking brain is offline more frequently. From there, what that means is that other cognitive skills, which may be hard for them to access on a good day, are even harder to access. So specifically, what comes immediately to mind when I think of how these regulation and stress recovery skills, how they relate to motivation, are when stress reactions escalate quickly under pressure. So I want you to think about, does this sound like my child, right? Stress reactions escalate quickly under pressure. And it may not just be an explosive reaction. That absolutely can be the reaction, the behavior we're talking about, but it also can be a shutdown or a withdrawal reaction as well. Do their energy levels fluctuate unpredictably? And are there big and strong reactions to everyday demands? And again, that reaction can be more explosive, but it can also be more of that shutdown, going inward type of reaction. So think about how this lagging skill can present when viewed through a behavioral lens. It can be viewed as laziness or lack of motivation. Now, the second one that comes to mind is related to cognitive processing and mental stamina skills. So again, think about your child. Does this sound like them? Does this relate to them? What I'm talking about here is being mentally taxed by situations or demands that everyone around them find very simple or routine. So when you think things to yourself like, are you kidding me? You're telling me, or maybe they're showing you through some type of oppositional or defiant behavior, like you're telling me that you can't do this. You can do this. If you were even just a little self-motivated, if you cared at all, you could definitely do this. We're communicating in those kinds of comments in those moments that we believe it is their choice. and not about their inability to process quickly, to keep pace with everything around them, and to have the stamina to manage all that life is throwing their way. The other cognitive skills that come to mind related to being motivated, the ability to be motivated, stay motivated, to self-motivate, planning, organizing, and follow through. These skills are another biggie. These are really those executive functioning skills that get especially tricky for our tween and teens and young adults because they're expected to have these in place more so than younger kids. And many of them really, really struggle with them. And when they struggle with them, it looks as though, again, when viewed through a behavioral lens, that they are not motivated, that they are lazy. So these are things like struggling to focus, struggling to organize their time, struggling to plan out the steps they need to reach even simple goals, struggling to carry out more than one step at a time. It's all connected to that ability to be quote unquote motivated and to maintain that motivation ongoing. Now, the other one, and this one is also a biggie. I know I keep saying that. They're all big. It's a common and it's a big contributor. It is the difficulty initiating tasks. Not only the difficulty to initiate tasks to get started independently, but especially when it comes to non-preferred activities. When this skill is misunderstood as willful behavior, it leads to lots of frustration for parents, especially that non-preferred activities piece. I'll hear things like, well, they have no trouble motivating themselves to play their video games, but when it's time for their homework, they just won't do it. And I get why this is confusing, but I want you to think for a minute about how this plays out for all of us in our lives, where we spend a lot of time doing what I call adulting, which basically is doing all of those non-preferred activities that we don't like to do, but we know they have to be done. It's part of being an adult in this world, right? If we're honest with ourselves, we do find ways to procrastinate. We do try to get out of those tasks, and we have behavioral symptoms when we come face to face with them. Maybe irritability or annoyance or avoidance or shutdown. Maybe we're a little more short-tempered, or maybe we have a lot of anxiety, maybe overwhelm. If it's something big or important or something that we've been putting off, which now has created even more pressure for us, making it even harder to get started. So it happens to us too. It's not just our kids. It's a brain thing for us too to get motivated and initiate that task to get started. But if you are a mature adult who identifies as neurotypical, meaning you have a brain that works as expected, then you probably have the skills, the cognitive skills, and the resilience, the nervous system resilience to get started and just do the dang thing. You can rise above it, right? You can move out of that inertia that has set in. Now, our kids who are still maturing, who have brains that work differently, so they have those lagging cognitive skills, they have a more fragile nervous system, which impacts their resilience, they can't respond in the same way. They don't have the skills to do that. They don't have the neurobiology to do that. It's not laziness. It's not that they don't care about anything. They do desire to have the thing they've articulated wanting. They just can't access the skills needed to, for example, get started, to keep going, to focus, to reach that finish line, whatever that means for their situation. Now, there's a few other cognitive skills that I want to mention before we wrap up. Learning and memory skills, like needing lots of prompts, lots of reminders. This can look like a lack of motivation. Also, the inconsistent performance that is so common with kids who have neurobehavioral conditions, those on and off days. It is definitely a contributor. I cover that in episode 5 of this podcast, so you can learn more about that specific cognitive skill by listening to that episode if you've not had the chance to dive into it yet. And the last one that I want to mention is emotional regulation, emotional expression, and emotional response skills, all brain things, all cognitive skills. If you have, again, a child, a tween, a teen, a young adult who lives with a brain-based difference and they struggle with these skills, you've seen this behavior. You've seen this reflected through behaviors. And those behaviors reflect their narrow window of tolerance for life stressors, even those stressors that seem so insignificant to everyone else around them. If you're not familiar with what I mean by window of tolerance, you can listen to episode 28 of this podcast, okay? Supporting our kids to be motivated requires us to gently nudge and gently encourage them while also being mindful of their window of tolerance, which for many kids with brain-based differences is very, very narrow. This is such a delicate balance, but it's really an important one for parents to reflect on and become familiar with as it relates to their unique child. What we see as a lack of motivation can absolutely be about them feeling overwhelmed by a task or an expectation that is way beyond them in terms of their current cognitive skill development, along with that narrow window of tolerance that is just not being acknowledged, not being accommodated. So again, please listen to that episode 28, if you're not familiar with window of tolerance. And I'll link to all of these episodes that I've mentioned in the show notes so that you can find them easily there when you're done with this episode. Alrighty, I think that's a pretty comprehensive list of the cognitive skills that are required of any human, including your child, to be motivated. I might be missing a few, but I think it's a pretty good list. And what I hope this list that we've gone over in this episode, what I hope it's really emphasized and highlighted for you is that there's a lot going on in the brain to motivate someone, get them started, keep them motivated, be self-motivated. Your child is not lazy. They do want the things they talk about wanting. They do care. That shutdown, that refusal, that irritability, those are defensive behaviors, defending against a world that is not set up for them, does not understand them, that is really, really stressful for them. I know as their parent, when you see them in that high state of anxiety or irritability or the extreme shutdown or the defiance or the withdrawal from the world, it is so, so hard. I know it can make you sick with worry. You want them to make forward progress in life. Of course you do. And when that's stalled or when it is happening, but at this glacial speed, it can bring panic. It can bring fear, definitely bring sadness and a feeling of helplessness as a parent. What I hope I've helped explain clearly here is that instead of reaching for our power in those moments to try and force them into being more motivated, the first step in helping them to access motivation is to understand that to do the thing, to be motivated, to meet that expectation or complete the task or whatever it might be, it requires cognitive skills that may not be fully developed for them yet. And because of this, they need lots of accommodations, lots of scaffolded support, sometimes much, much more than we initially realized. And as I've already said, I know this is a really hard one for many of you. Know that if you are navigating this, if you can relate to this topic, this episode, and especially the panic or the fear, that sick with worry, the sadness that it brings, my heart goes out to you as you navigate it all and try to support your child in this area. Thanks as always for joining me today. I really appreciate you being here and listening in. And until next time, take care. Hey, real quick before we go, if you are on Instagram or Facebook and you have not yet hit that follow button for Eileen Devine and Brain First Parenting, that is where I hang out and share information every single day about the Brain First Parenting approach, as well as my upcoming workshops or free resources that I've created for parents just like you. It would mean the world to me if you join me on either one of those platforms. Thank you, and I look forward to seeing you there.